What's going on, guys? This is Jake Boley with BarBend.com. Today we're going to be talking about and reviewing the Theragun G3. Now, before we dive into this review and go over all the pros, cons, price, and best uses with this device, I'm going to be straight up, I'm not a masseuse, and I'm not specialized in the art of PT. However, I am a recreational athlete and I am a trainer, so I do have some uses and best guidelines for the Theragun G3 that I've kind of learned and experimented with. But without further ado, let's talk about the Theragun G3 in general and what it's used for. So what is the Theragun G3? So this is marketed as a percussive therapy device. Percussive therapy is the short, rapid pulses you're going to be getting from this device on the body. It's designed to basically target the soft tissue. And now it's meant to be more of an activation slash recovery tool, as in it's going to help mobility, it's supposed to help out blood flow, it's supposed to help out just overall recovery of muscles following workouts, and speed up the whole recovery process. Now, does that work? It's tough to say. There isn't a ton of data out there and research on these devices just yet. However, using it on more of an anecdotal kind of basis with my body and like a surgery that I've had on my knee, we can dive into how to use it and kind of what I've thought from a recreational standpoint and more of a trainer standpoint later on in this video. But now I want to dive into some of the pros that come along with the G3. All right, so I have 4 pros with the Theragun G3. Is number 1, the simplistic nature of the device. It has 2 different buttons. It has an on and off button, and then it has a button to adjust the speeds. My second pro is those 2 different speeds and the different attachments. They come with softer and more firm and more precise and larger attachments with the 2 different speeds of 40 percussions per minute and 29 percussions per minute. You can adjust the intensity of this device pretty accordingly based on the tenderness or soreness of the muscles slash joints or areas in the body you're using the G3 for. My third pro with this device is that it does kind of take away some of that manual work you have to do pre and post workout. If you're like me and a little bit lazy, then it's kind of nice to use for just loosening up certain areas and running over certain areas that you would normally be doing a little bit of static stretching or light therapy on anyways, to kind of promote just the overall recovery process. The fourth pro I have with the Theragun G3 is the app Theragun uses. If you're brand new to a percussive therapy device and you don't really know how to use it or where to put it on your body for certain benefit, their app takes you through a lot of different uses and then offers different imagery and areas that you can use the device on. If you're brand new to this form of device, again, I think that's extremely useful and it's pretty intuitive when trying to figure out how to navigate and use the G3 on your body. All right, 2 cons I have with the Theragun G3 is number 1, the price. Now, if you look around at other reviews, you will notice that price is always a concern for consumers. This device costs $400. Now, let's talk about that objectively. If you're a recreational athlete and $400 is expensive to you, then you do not need this. You could probably get by just using manual activation and recovery practices as you are. But if you are a serious athlete and $400 can be justified, then you might want to invest in this because it is something that can maybe help you with marginal gains in both activation and the recovery areas of training. So if you're serious, maybe it's worth it, but if you're a recreational athlete who just kind of trains habitually on your own on more of a routine basis, then $400 is pretty damn steep in my opinion. All right, the second con I have with the Theragun G3 is for more the trainer who has, like, let's say back-to-back or back-to-back-to-back clients. I find that the 60-minute battery life is a little limiting, especially if I don't have the chance to plug this in between sessions or during sessions. So that being said, if you're a trainer and if you're working with clients that are right after one another and so forth, I would highly recommend plugging this in between sessions or during your sessions, because otherwise the battery might be a little bit limiting and you don't want to have this obviously die out mid-client when you're using it on them, because it's just going to seem a little bit unprofessional. Price of the Theragun G3, you're looking at $400. Now, we touched on this in the cons section, so I'm not going to go too deep into price, but I do think there are athletes in certain populations that $400 can be very justified for. But again, $400 is pretty steep for the recreational athlete. All right, so before we dive into the construction specs of the G3 and what comes in the package, let's talk about some of its best uses. Now, I'm going to talk from personal experience with how I like to use this, and now everybody will be slightly different, but here's how I've kind of adapted it to my training. So let's talk about pre-workout first. One way I like to use this is for tight areas of my body. So a lot of areas of my body that get tight are my quads, my calves, and my hips, and that's because I sit down all day. So what I'll do is I'll use the softer tip of this and go over those areas for like 2 to 3 minutes, and then I'll get into my squat workout and mobility work then before I physically start loading my body. Another way I like to use this pre-workout is on areas that I've had surgery. So I ruptured my quad 2 years ago, and I still have tightness in that quad area towards the top of the kneecap. I'll use this with the cone tip, and I'll kind of dig in there just for a little bit at a very light speed. So I'll use the second speed and kind of try to loosen up that area. Now, let's talk about post-workout. Some ways I like to use this is on areas that are feeling almost a little bit sore or tender when I'm finishing a workout. Now, it doesn't happen all of the time, and usually my workouts are well within their limits, but if I do overreach some days, like some days on my deadlifts when my glutes are really feeling it, or my hamstrings are getting a little bit tight, or maybe even my erectors are starting to feel it, I'll use the lighter end of this and just go over lightly on those areas and hold it on areas that I feel are a little bit more tender, just to kind of promote some blood flow to that area. Now, have I noticed a huge difference in soreness? It's tough to say. It could be more placebo. It could be the Theragun. I'm not exactly sure. But it does tend to help a little bit with post-workout when it comes to just targeting certain areas that you're feeling a little bit tender or possibly sore. Another way I like to use this, and this is the final way I like to use this post-workout, is just really going over the areas that I first worked on. So my calves, quads, and hips, for example, they get really tight. If I load them, they get pretty tight after the workout as well. So I'll go over them once again before I leave. I'll do a little bit of static stretching as well following the Theragun use. And that's just to kind of prolong my overall mobility that I have around those areas. So again, these are the ways I like to use the Theragun G3. You might find that you want this for a completely different reason, but if I had to give you my anecdotal experience using this, that's what I've found works best for me and benefits my body best pre and post training. All right, so a quick rundown on the construction specs of the Theragun G3. The stroke length of the tip is 16 millimeters. It can provide up to 40 pounds of pressure, and it has 2 different speeds coming out to 40 pulses per minute and 29 pulses per minute. The battery life, once again, lasts about 60 minutes, and that will be variable based on the pressure in which you're using it. That wraps up the major construction specs worth knowing about the Theragun G3. Now let's dive into the package and see what you get with this device. All right, so now let's go over what you get in the Theragun G3 package. For starters, you get this cool, sleek carrying case that looks like a grade schooler's lunchbox. Let's go ahead and open up the device itself. So over here we have the Theragun, which is separated by this foam material. And then if we look over here, we have a charging cable that has its own little carrying case. We get the Theragun manual that has different details and specs on the device itself. And then we have 4 different attachments. You have the dampening attachment here. It's a little bit softer and a little bit bigger. As you can see, it compresses a little bit. We have a more of a thumb-like attachment. We have like the standard ball. It has a little bit of give to it, and it's smaller than the dampener here. And then we have more like the cone/rod shaped. It's a little bit more firm, and it's for very precise and accurate getting into muscles and joints. So that wraps up my review of the Theragun G3. To read my full thoughts, check out the description below and comment below if you've ever used the G3 and if you like using the Theragun devices.